The Kingdom of Olorun was a jewel in the heart of the continent, blessed with fertile soil, strong warriors, and a bustling trade that stretched from the desert caravans to the distant coasts. Palm trees lined the great river that cut through the capital, and the markets rang with the sound of drums, laughter, and merchants boasting of their wares. At the heart of this prosperity stood the royal palace, its high walls decorated with carvings of past victories and sacred symbols of the gods. The people revered their rulers, for it was said the king's bloodline was chosen by the heavens themselves. King Adewale, though loved for his fairness and wisdom, carried a deep sorrow in his heart. For many years he had ruled without an heir to inherit his throne. The kingdom's elders whispered that the gods must be displeased, while others blamed hidden curses or jealous rivals. Adewale, however, placed his hope in his queen, Nkiru, a woman of striking beauty and unyielding grace. She was cherished by the people, praised in songs and stories, yet her womb remained empty. Each year that passed without a child weighed heavily upon the king, for he feared that without a son or daughter, the unity of the kingdom would falter. But behind the serene face of Queen Nkiru, a storm brewed. Her heart, though loyal in duty, was not wholly bound to the king. She carried a secret too dangerous to whisper even to the closest of friends. In hidden gardens, beneath the scent of night-blooming jasmine, she found comfort in the arms of another. This love, forbidden yet irresistible, was the only balm to her loneliness. As the kingdom celebrated prosperity, the seeds of betrayal had already been sown, waiting for the day when truth and desire would collide with destiny. Every morning, King Adewale rose before the sun and walked the palace courtyards alone. He prayed at the shrine of Ogun, the god of strength, for a son to inherit his throne. His people looked to him as a symbol of order, yet he felt powerless in the face of fate. The elders pressed him to take another wife, for in Olorun it was not forbidden, but Adewale's heart stuck stubbornly to Queen Nkiru. He loved her more deeply than he admitted, and he believed that abandoning her would dishonor both their bond and the gods. At the same time, political pressures mounted. Neighboring kingdoms grew envious of Olorun's wealth, and whispers of war reached the ears of the king's council. Without a clear heir, some feared rivals would use the uncertainty to challenge Adewale's reign. The people adored Nkiru for her kindness and beauty, but even their love could not silence the murmurs about her empty womb. Adewale bore it all in silence, presenting to his court the image of a strong, confident leader, though inside he was plagued by despair. Unbeknownst to him, while he poured his soul into prayers for a child, Queen Nkiru's own prayers took a different form. In secret, she prayed not for the king's heir, but for the safety of the man who held her heart in the shadows. The two worlds she lived in, queen by day, lover by night, threatened to collapse upon her. She knew the king's longing for an heir would soon reach a breaking point, and when it did, the truth of her betrayal would be the spark that could consume them all. The queen's secret lover was not a nobleman, nor a warrior, nor anyone the elders would deem worthy of her touch. He was Chike, a royal servant entrusted with tending the gardens. His hands, calloused from toil, carried the fragrance of earth and the strength of one who knew no luxury. Yet it was in those hands that Nkiru found solace. Chike spoke to her not as a queen, but as a woman. He listened when others demanded, and he saw her not as a vessel for heirs, but as a soul in need of love. Their meetings were stolen moments, woven carefully into the tapestry of palace life. In the moonlit gardens, hidden by thick vines and the soft murmur of water fountains, they whispered promises neither dared to believe could last. For Nkiru, Chike was freedom, a chance to feel alive beyond the gilded cage of the throne. For Chike, she was both a dream and a curse. For he knew that discovery meant death. Yet each time they parted, the longing only deepened, pulling them back into each other's arms despite the danger. The queen's heart swelled with a love that defied her reason. But with every embrace, she knew she was weaving a fragile net of lies that could shatter the very foundation of the kingdom. She told herself she could balance both worlds, duty and desire. But fate had already begun to move against her. One day, the secret she guarded so fiercely would be revealed, and when it was, no power on earth could protect them from the storm to come. Though Nkiru and Chike cloaked their love in secrecy, palace walls had ears sharper than blades. Servants who swept the corridors and carried trays of food noticed subtle changes. The queen lingering too long in the gardens, her eyes lighting at the presence of a mere gardener. At first, they dismissed it as imagination, but whispers are like dry grass in the wind. Once sparked, they spread with uncontrollable speed. One such whisper reached Olana, the queen's most loyal handmaiden. She loved her mistress dearly and had served her since girlhood. To her, Nkiru was more than a queen. She was family. When she overheard two cooks speaking of the queen's hidden smiles, her heart clenched. Olana tried to dismiss it, but as days passed, she began to see what others had overlooked: the fleeting glances, the sudden departures into the gardens, and the warmth that colored her queen's cheeks. Tormented, Olana swore to protect Nkiru's honor, yet a growing fear gnawed at her. If the whispers reached the king or the council, the punishment would not only fall upon Chike, but upon the queen herself. The fragile peace of the palace hung by a thread, and Olana knew it would not take long before someone else began to tug at it. Months passed, and with them came news that shook the palace to its foundation. Queen Nkiru was with child. The announcement spread like wildfire, bringing unrestrained joy to King Adewale and his people. The king wept openly before the council, declaring it a sign that the gods had heard his prayers. Festivals erupted throughout Olorun. Drums thundered, dancers filled the streets, and merchants offered gifts of gold, yam, and wine to honor the unborn heir. Adewale's heart swelled with pride, and he lavished his queen with adoration. He vowed before the gods that he would protect both mother and child with his life. For the first time in years, the shadows of doubt lifted from his spirit, and he walked with the confidence of a man who believed his dynasty would endure. But within Queen Nkiru, joy and dread battled for dominance. Though she smiled at the celebrations and accepted the king's tender gestures, her heart trembled with fear. She knew that the life stirring within her was not born of Adewale's prayers, but of her secret nights with Chike. Each kick of the unborn child reminded her of the love she had chosen and the betrayal she could not undo. The kingdom rejoiced, but Nkiru's peace was fleeting. In the quiet of the night, she lay awake, haunted by a question that clawed at her soul. When the truth surfaced, as it surely must, would love or ruin prevail? Chike's heart burned with pride and terror when he learned of the queen's pregnancy. He was torn between joy that his love had borne fruit and dread of the consequences if the truth was discovered. Each time he worked in the gardens, he caught glimpses of Nkiru from afar, her hand resting protectively on her belly, and a longing filled him so strong he had to look away. He wanted to claim his child, but he knew doing so meant certain death. At night, Nkiru found ways to pass him secret tokens, an embroidered cloth, a whispered word carried by Olana. These fleeting signs of affection kept their bond alive, yet Chike saw danger everywhere. Other servants began to notice his absences during the queen's strolls, and one of the guards remarked on his nervousness. Fear gripped him, but his love anchored him to his dangerous path. Olana grew more troubled by the day. She adored her queen, but she could not blind herself to the truth. She had witnessed too much: hidden glances, trembling smiles, and once a lock of Chike's hair clutched tightly in Nkiru's hand. The handmaiden knew that if the elders or the king himself uncovered the betrayal, the punishment would be severe: exile at best, death at worst. After many sleepless nights, Olana made a choice. She would confront Nkiru directly, pleading with her to end the affair for the sake of her crown and her unborn child. But when she stood before her queen, the words faltered. Nkiru's eyes glowed with such fragile happiness that her heart softened. Instead, she promised herself she would shield the queen's secret as long as she could, though she prayed desperately that no one else would uncover it. The council of elders, wise but sharp-eyed, watched the sudden blessing of pregnancy with cautious wonder. Some praised the gods, while others whispered in hushed tones. The queen had been barren for years, yet she now carried a child just as the king considered taking another wife. Was it coincidence or a divine sign? Elder Onwadiwe, the most skeptical of the council, pressed for answers. "The bloodline of Olorun must be pure," he said. "We must not ignore what the gods may be trying to show us." His words stirred unease, but the king dismissed suspicion, refusing to let doubt taint his joy. Still, the elders resolved to keep a closer watch on the palace, and their attention soon turned toward the movements of the queen's servants. As Nkiru's belly grew, so too did the scrutiny around her. Guards shadowed her steps, midwives monitored her health, and the people sang songs of the heir-to-be. The queen smiled for them all, but inside, fear gnawed her spirit. She avoided lingering too long near Chike, yet their hearts ached in the distance. Each stolen glance across the gardens became more dangerous, yet more impossible to resist. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in amber, a guard spotted Chike slipping out from the queen's private courtyard. Though Chike explained it was for garden duties, suspicion took root. Rumors began to swirl among the soldiers, and though no proof yet existed, the fragile veil of secrecy started to tear. Nkiru knew it was only a matter of time before someone brave enough voiced the suspicion aloud. The day came when the queen went into labor, and the entire kingdom held its breath. Drums rolled through the night, prayers rose like smoke into the heavens, and torches lit the streets as the people awaited their future ruler. After long hours of pain and struggle, Nkiru bore a son, strong, wailing, and radiant with life.
The king fell to his knees in gratitude, proclaiming that the gods had restored his bloodline. The people erupted in celebrations. Feasts filled the streets, warriors fired arrows into the sky, and mothers lifted their children, declaring that Olorun's future was secured. Yet, amid the joy, shadows lingered. Chike, hidden among the servants, wept silently at the sight of the child he could not claim. Olana's hands trembled as she swaddled the infant, torn between loyalty to her queen and fear of the day when the truth would surface. And Nkiru, though smiling for her people, felt the weight of her secret heavier than ever. For now, the kingdom's very future was bound to her forbidden love. King Adewale was transformed by the birth of his son. He walked among his people with renewed strength, lifting the infant high before the cheering crowds. For the first time in years, he felt the burden of his prayers lifted, convinced the gods had finally blessed him. He swore to raise the child as a wise and just ruler, one who would surpass even his own reign. At night, he sat by the queen's side, whispering his gratitude. Nkiru, though smiling, often turned away to hide the tears brimming in her eyes. To the king, they were tears of joy. To Nkiru, they were the silent confession of a truth she dared not speak. The child had Adewale's love, but not his blood. Chike lived in agony. Each cry of the baby reminded him of the son who carried his blood, yet belonged to another. He dared not linger near the child for fear of betraying his emotions. Some servants noticed his strange behavior, how he tensed when the baby was praised, how he avoided speaking of the heir. To them it was odd, but to Chike it was unbearable. At night he walked the gardens alone, staring at the moon and whispering to the gods, "Let him grow strong, even if he never knows my name." Yet beneath his whispered prayers
lay a gnawing temptation to claim his son, to tear away the mask of secrecy. But one reckless word could cost not only his life, but also Nkiru's and the child's. Oana's heart ached as she watched the tangled threads of love and deceit tightening around the queen. Each day she held the child, soothing him with lullabies while silently wrestling with guilt. She wanted to protect Nkiru, but the burden of the secret grew too heavy. When Elder Onwudiwe began asking subtle questions about the queen's health during pregnancy, Oana trembled. She feared he suspected the truth. Torn between loyalty to Nkiru and duty to the kingdom, Oana wondered whether silence was still kindness, or whether revealing the truth might prevent a disaster greater than betrayal. Her sleepless nights grew longer, and her prayers to the gods went unanswered. Elder Onwudiwe's doubts only deepened. He found it strange that the queen's sudden fertility coincided with rumors of her frequent walks in the gardens. He questioned the guards, the servants, even the midwives. Though no one gave him proof, he pieced together fragments of suspicion, and all paths seemed to circle back to one man, Chike, the gardener. The council debated quietly among themselves. Some dismissed the whispers, urging unity and celebration. But others argued that if the child's bloodline was tainted, the throne of Olorun could face ruin. They resolved to watch closely, and Elder Onwudiwe vowed that the truth, however painful, would soon be revealed. To honor the birth of the heir, the kingdom declared the Festival of Life, a grand celebration of music, dance, and sacrifice to the gods. People traveled from far villages to offer gifts to the child.
The air was thick with joy, yet beneath the drums and laughter, tension coiled like a hidden snake. During the festival, Elder Onwudiwe's sharp eyes never left Chike. He noticed how the young man lingered near the queen's entourage, how his gaze drifted toward the child. Though Chike quickly looked away, the elder saw enough to confirm his suspicion. That night, under the stars, Onwudiwe declared to the council, "The heir of Olorun is not the king's. The queen carries a secret that will destroy us all." The council convened in secret, their faces grim under the torchlight. Onwudiwe laid out his suspicions, pointing to Chike's strange behavior and the queen's sudden fertility after years of barrenness. Some elders gasped, others shook their heads in disbelief. These are dangerous words. To accuse the queen without proof is to risk tearing the kingdom apart, Elder Amina warned. But Onwudiwe was relentless. If the bloodline is tainted, then our gods will withdraw their blessing. Better to expose the wound now than to let it fester. After much debate, they agreed to bring their suspicions before the king. The next day, as Adewale sat in his throne hall with his son in his arms, the council entered with heavy hearts. Onwudiwe stepped forward and spoke the words that silenced the chamber. "My king, your heir is not of your blood." The accusation struck like lightning. King Adewale rose to his feet, his eyes blazing with fury and disbelief. "Do you dare insult my queen and dishonor my gods?" he thundered. Yet even as he spoke, his gaze darted to Nkiru, searching for reassurance. But the queen's trembling hands betrayed her. Dragged before the elders, Nkiru was pressed to confess. At first, she denied the charge, clinging to silence. But when they threatened to cast her child aside, her voice broke. With tears streaming down her face, she admitted the truth, her love for Chike, the father of her son. Gasps echoed through the hall. Adewale's heart shattered, not only from the betrayal, but from the humiliation of the revelation before his people. The council demanded swift judgment. "The queen must be banished," Onwudiwe declared, "and the child cannot sit upon the throne of Olorun." Others, more merciful, urged caution. But tradition was clear. Betrayal of the king was betrayal of the gods. King Adewale sat in silence, his head bowed, his heart in turmoil. He loved his son deeply, though he was not his. He loved his queen still, though she had wounded him. To banish her was justice, but it would tear his soul apart. After long deliberation, he arose and spoke. "If the gods have cursed me, let me bear it. I will not condemn the woman I love, nor cast aside the child who knows no sin. But the people must decide." The news spread through Olorun like wildfire. Crowds gathered in the palace square as the elders explained the queen's betrayal. Many expected anger, but the people's voices rose in an unexpected chorus. "We love our queen," they cried. "We love the child she has given us." Farmers, warriors, traders, and mothers alike spoke of Nkiru's kindness, her generosity, and the hope the young prince had brought. The council was stunned. Never before had the will of the people risen so strongly against tradition. Though some still grumbled of tainted bloodlines, the majority demanded mercy. At last, the elders yielded, and King Adewale, moved by his people's devotion, forgave Nkiru publicly. He lifted his son high before the crowd and declared, "This child shall be my heir, for he is chosen not by blood alone, but by love and by the people of Olorun." Thank you so much for listening to the story at Folklore Chronicles-k Stories. And please, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, kindly click on the subscribe button, turn on the notifications so when I post more stories like this, you'll be the first to get them. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate your support, and I do not take it for granted at all. Until I see you in my next video, bye. Okay.